We're good? All right. Welcome to the Wednesday, January 8th, 2025 Garrison Board of Education regular workshop meeting. Just we call roll call, please.
Jocelyn Apicello,
Hopefully she'll be here soon, okay?
Eric Arnold.
Here.
Jennifer Harrison Wilson.
Here.
Dan Jasnow.
Here.
Peter Lesser.
Here.
Ken Shaw.
Here.
Sarah Tony.
Here. All right, I'll rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. Next up, I have accept agenda changes. Does anyone have any agenda changes for this evening? Okay. Here's all the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby accept the agenda as presented. May I have a motion, please?
Motion. Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Abstention. Okay. All right. That brings us to the superintendent's report. All you, Dr. Schultz.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to welcome everyone back in the community, those that are here in person and those that are going to watch this a little bit later. So welcome back. Happy New Year. I hope everyone had a restful and recharging and enjoyable break. I just wanted to remind everybody that Ms. Bucala, our new environmental educator, started this week, and she is getting to know the students and really excited to be here. And I know the community is going to hear from her very shortly. We want to at least let her get settled for a little bit, and I know she has a lot of wonderful things planned. So we want to welcome Krista to the Guffs family. A little bit later, I'm going to join my friends, and we're going to do a board presentation. So the rest of my superintendent's report will be quite short. Just a couple reminders, and thank you for those in the community that already have done it. In grades K through 8, I sent out information on completing a digital equity survey for those families that have done so already. Thank you so much. For those families that have not, if you don't mind please doing that, that would be great. Also on January 20th, just a couple reminders for people. I know we're back from break and we have to clear a little bit of the vacation fog from our heads. January 20th is Martin Luther King Day, schools are closed. Also, Asian Lunar New Year is on January 29th, schools are closed on that day. A couple of reminders, January 30th is our International Potluck Dinner at 5 p.m. And on February 7th, I know our middle schoolers are looking forward to it. So that concludes my superintendent's report at this moment.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for Fred? All right. That moves us on to our board communications and presentations. We're going to begin this evening with a presentation on optimizing instructional space. Turn this over to Greg and Allison.
Presentation.
Here.
So, thank you for the opportunity to present, and everybody knows I'm Greg Stover, the superintendent of schools. I'm gonna ask my colleagues here to introduce themselves so the community knows who's presenting this evening.
Hello, good evening. I'm Allison Emmett. I'm the building principal. Happy New Year. I'm so happy to be here tonight.
Hello, I'm Halcyon Darren Salt, and I'm a sixth grade here at Garrison.
Fantastic. One of the things that we wanted to present this evening, come over to the side. I don't want to block off. Way too important. Garrison has been looking, and we're in one of the spaces that we've been exploring. How does space affect instructional pedagogy, learning, and environment? And we're continuing that effort, and we're really focusing now on the classroom spaces. And what do we need to do so that we can enhance student engagement, we can enhance outcomes? We want to we're already starting this work in some of our classrooms, but we really want to formalize it. What are we doing well? What are some pockets of innovation that are happening in our classrooms? What are some of the learning that we can do professionally to kind of even enhance it? And what do we need to hear from some of our students about how do they learn best? Those are really important items that I think are going to be something that we're going to explore. So we're really excited to share with you some of our thinking, some of our learning, and where we want to go in the future. So I'm going to be silent, which is not easy for me, and I'm going to kick it over to Halcyon and to Allison.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Stoll. Go ahead. So, like Dr. Stoll just shared with you, this is a continuation of things that we have already started here in GOVS. So when I first came here years ago, our elementary classrooms were, had beautiful furniture, and then we had a capital project, and we were able to get the cabinetry that was a complement to the furniture, and then we ended up purchasing some additional storage. And so the elementary classrooms were really looking beautiful. And most recently, last year, we also advocated for some additional funds for 4th and 5th grade classrooms so that they had desks and seating that were perfect for their bodies and for storage capacity in terms of just the actual desks themselves. And now we're looking at the middle school classrooms and seeing where there's opportunities for improvement in those learning spaces as well. The Learning Commons is a perfect example of a really optimized learning environment that's flexible and has lots of options for movement, dry erase tables, and just different learning zones. So again, having like little elements of the Learning Commons within the classroom setting would be a wonderful thing for our kids. Of course, it enhances, and the reason why we do what we do is because we want to enhance student learning and improve outcomes. And the research that's out there really supports this. So I'm going to pass it to Halcyon, who will just talk just briefly about some of the student challenges that we're facing in our middle school.
Before we move on, I would like to address the struggle of middle school students and the growth of their bodies and affecting how they learn. Another point I would like to bring up is there's a limited amount of space in the desk that we use in many of our classrooms in the school. So this leads to a large amount of kids feeling cramped and distracted. So if we got this flexible seating options, this could be a solution. Plus, it also provides. Never mind. Thank you.
Let's just go back to that just for 1 second. These are students within our current middle school. And we just wanted to point out that 2 classrooms actually have the trapezoid tables that were the ones that were in our elementary program. They actually work quite nicely for our middle school. So there's 2 classrooms that have that furniture, while other classrooms, there's 3 that have the desks that have like an open, you can see that the storage, they would really use a storage option for them there. So it's something that we're looking at. So there's 3 classrooms that are like that. And again, it's just, as the students are growing and they're in 8th grade, these are just some things that we just want to look at. Again, there are some ways that we can adapt this furniture that we'll talk further in the presentation, in ways that we can maximize what we already have and supplement with other things to make it a better learning environment.
This is a quote from a girl in my class who did this. Flexible seating helps kids focus and want to learn. As a fidgety person, I learn 10 times better in a beanbag chair. It makes teachers' lives easier with excited students. The idea of a soft, comfy classroom is very appealing. Julia Murphy in the 6th grade wrote this, and we wanted to get a picture of her in a beanbag chair, showing that she's engaged and still learning very well, even though she is in a flexible seating option. But sadly, yet, since we don't have that option, we couldn't do that. But in my social studies classroom, we do have a very beloved beanbag chair that we all love to use. So this would just provide more good and engaging learning options for the middle school. As you can see, what?
Oh, is that good? Go ahead, Martha.
As you can see in this classroom, there's already many flexible seating options. And you can see even though they are in flexible seating options, they're very engaged and they're learning very well. As you can see, they're all like very into what they're doing. They're all looking at their computers, even though they're in these comfy beanbag chairs, which you would think would be a distraction, but it really isn't. It's really more providing them a more comfortable and better learning option. Also, another thing is you can see that there are all of these seats actually are very close together. And as you can see, like the two friends or many friends in this picture are very close together. They're practically touching. That isn't stopping them from being very engaged. And like they're still like very engaged in their learning. So we just want to point that out. Even though there's a couch with and people are practically touching, it's very easy for them to like still learn because it's a very good option for them.
So in this particular classroom in one of our elementary wing, the teacher did note that with this, it's a little mini modular sofa and soft seating. It's in the classroom library and it has, as you can see, like a really nice area rug for the kids. Many of our classrooms already at the elementary level also have this floor seating that you can see. It has almost like a fixed back as well. There's a TV off to the side that you cannot see. But the teacher did share with me that there's a marked difference in engagement and in focus, and of course the research supports that as well. The kids are really eager. The kids are excited for the learning, and they want to get into that spot, into that cozy corner to do their work. So they're eager. They're active, so it does definitely allow for a lot of movement breaks, and it creates that active learning feel, which also increases engagement. And the kids are taking pride in the space. And that's another big area of focus too, in terms of boosting their executive functioning, boosting their motivation and their pride. They have classroom jobs, they know exactly what they should and shouldn't do within that learning space, what kinds of learning happens in that space, and they implement those rules and they support each other to make sure that they're taking care of it. So this is what the teacher is reporting, decrease in problematic behavior, increase in engagement, and maximizing instructional time. So the research also supports that kids need breaks, kids need movement breaks. So let's say we have adapted some of our furniture that we currently have in the middle school with using wheels, which we can easily do. This will give some mobility and flexibility within the classroom to create collaborative learning environments. This is that pedagogical shift that we're thinking about in terms of direct instruction, when it's appropriate to have direct instruction, when it's more appropriate to have collaboration, which that is the pedagogical shift. The collaboration could look very experiential. The collaboration could look like project-based learning. So again, like those are those opportunities that we're looking to increasing the motivation, the focus for kids, reduce stress levels if there's opportunities, let's say within a classroom, if you're in an elementary classroom, to have like a calming corner for kids to have a place that they can go and get regulated, things like that, and a higher productivity within the classroom setting. So this is what our research is suggesting. The types of flexible seating that we already have, we have standing desks in almost all of the classrooms. We've been slowly adding that, like over the past couple of years. And there's a lot of research that supports that. Some kids, not all, need that opportunity to get up and just stand, and they do really well. On the standing desk, there's a bar that the kids can put their feet on, and they can kind of swing it back and forth. So it gives them that opportunity to get the movement, but while still staying productive. Wobble stools, those are like an easy purchase, not super expensive, but has a lot of bang for your buck. There's a lot of research that supports the strengthening of the core when students are able to have that wiggle room. I was in a classroom today and this student was, he had his wobble stool next to him and he had his regular chair next to him. And I went to go sit in his regular chair while he was working beautifully, and he was like, I need that chair, I need my regular chair. And because he knows when to go back and forth, he's already learning how to self-regulate and monitor himself, and he is picking and choosing when to use the wobble stool versus his regular chair. So it's giving him that agency. And then again, like things like beanbag chairs, they're not the end all be all for flexible seating, but it is an option, maybe one or two here or there. They don't have the kind of support that some kids need, but it is a good option for some kids, not all. But again, we have floor cushions in the classrooms. We have those little floor seat cushions that actually have a back as well. We have traditional chairs, and those are necessary as well. And like little sofa love seats, like in the back where you see the teachers are sitting, those are those like, softer seating options that are more like booth styles. So there's lots of different things that, we're exploring that we'd like to, just consider for the future, or ways to adapt our current environment with the things that we already do have. You can see like this one particular picture is just a collaboration space, again, on soft seating. I envision, areas within a middle school setting or even an elementary setting where there's small group areas where kids know that in this particular space, this is the kind of learning that happens here. So that is just one option where the furniture is ergonomically good for kids and that there are options for them. Again, the varied seating options, some of this is redundant, but again, addressing student needs and ongoing teacher collaboration and reflection. That is something that I think is really important because we have to have continued conversations about how we design our classrooms so that we're getting productivity out of students and that we know that students are learning and engaged. So that will be ongoing. Craig.
So we could put all flexible seating, soft seating in a classroom and not change instruction, and what will we have? A comfortable lounge. So what we really need to do is now focus on the instructional pedagogy, right? How does instruction have to change based upon the research? And how do you set up a classroom to maximize all the things that Halcyon and Allison talked about? Well, that takes some professional learning and that takes some work. So what we're focusing, we've really done some studying on a preliminary level. We've talked to teachers, there's a lot of great things happening in Garrison, but one of the things that we're shifting our focus to is the professional learning. So before we change anything in a classroom, we want to make sure the instruction is fit for that instruction, for that classroom environment. So if you look at the last piece here, zoned learning spaces with functionality and purpose, that's the engagement that we're going to start with our staff. So what are things that we are starting to consider? How can we build and work upon what we already have done in the building? We've got new smart boards in a lot of the classrooms. We have new bulletin boards. There's a lot of great stuff we've already done. So how do we build upon that? In this room right now, how do we even use this room even more effectively? What are some best practices that are already happening in our classrooms? Where are some pockets of innovation? What can we repurpose? What certain things do we have already that we can use in different ways? And how can we strategically sustain this effort, both fiscally and in a responsible way, and linked to the research? And some of our next steps to kind of get at this work is to visit some other districts who are farther ahead. There are a lot of districts that have been doing this for quite some time. I've been part of those. And they are a little ahead of us. I won't, be untruthful. However, they can serve as really good models for us, and we can learn from some of the pioneering that they have done. We need to start to provide some in-house PD. We can do that. We have experts already here that can provide in-house PD at no cost, and our professional learning structures can help support that. We can repurpose some existing items, and our own Joe Jimmick and Mike Odito has helped us find about 41 of those trapezoidal desks. And yes, our middle schoolers will fit. You've heard from Joe fits, our middle schoolers can fit. And what we're doing right now is we're actually getting casters. We're turning these into flexible seating. So Joe and Mike are looking at casters that we can add to these 41 desks, and we can, in short order, outfit some existing classrooms that you saw that have those traditional desks and quickly turn them into more flexible spaces, utilizing material we already have at a minimal cost. So those are things we're looking at. So what we're going to do, I think, next year is we're going to pilot with 2 classrooms to really become model classrooms in our middle school and work to serve as turnkey folks that will dive more deeply into the professional development. We'll try things and start to look at the research and start to implement some of that research in the classroom. So we wanted to share with you, we're really excited about this work. And we really you'll hear more about it as we go through the rest of this year, next year. But I wanted to thank Halcyon and Allison for presenting, and we think we can kind of transform some of our middle school classrooms relatively quickly at relatively little to no cost, and really start to focus on the instructional design, professional development, so we don't just create really comfortable spaces where the instruction doesn't match the research.
Thank you so much. Before you guys leave the podium, I just want to open it up to questions from the board. Anyone has any questions?
Just one, is this practice being put to use in high schools as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, the reason I ask is I was concerned about it being sort of this comfortable space and then very jarring transition to high school, but if it's going all the way through, that's great.
Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate, the fact that you're, the forward-thinking elements of this, and that you're, being proactive and thinking about how we can best use our instructional spaces. I am curious, in terms of how you envision implementing this, at the middle school level, would you imagine taking out the existing desks so we would see less of that kind of setup and then more of these, series of collaboration spaces? Does the research support, getting rid of desks altogether and doing, sort of these other, flex spaces? What does it look like? Is it a replacement of everything that's in there currently, or is it sort of supplementing to create additional spaces on top of what we already have?
Yeah, Dan, what I would say is, and I'm just giving you an example, that's a middle school classroom. If you look at that traditional desk that we probably all sat in as middle schoolers and high schoolers, there's really not much you can do with it. They're not adjustable. So do we envision changing some things out to create spaces where we can create different configurations? Yeah, we do look at that. And the research, Robert Dillon is one researcher that's big and working with schools, that he talks about different spaces, collaborative workspaces, a campfire, and then flexible furniture. So based upon what your mode of instruction is, kids can quickly change the space to really allow it to kind of meet the lesson objective. In terms of, you can do these things at low to no cost, and you can do it incrementally. So you can, as we talked about the 41 trapezoidal desks, we can quickly turn into flexible, rearrangeable furniture by finding casters and just adding it to them. And we want to start small. We want to pilot it, and we want to marry it to professional development and really kind of work in that space with the middle school teachers that are going to pilot this and start to learn from their experiences and then start to replicate so that it can be scalable over time. So we're going to start small. We're going to start with the instruction, and there are certain things we can do with the resources that we have, and we may just need to supplement here and there, which isn't really, astronomical cost, because we want this to be sustainable.
Yeah. Okay. I like that you're tying into the research, and I think, and I know we're also at the early stage of this. I would be particularly interested to know, what does the research say, at the middle school level in terms of academic performance over the long term? Is there an improvement in that? Obviously, you guys are a lot closer to the research and following that more closely than we are. If it were me and I had a lot of comfy seating, that would just result in a lot more nap time. But I'm sure, that doesn't bear out in the research here. But I would be curious, particularly if we're going to be budgeting for this or looking to incur a significant financial outlay associated with this, that the research does clearly align with, quantifiable academic performance improvements over what we currently have today.
And a lot of the research that I did do, it really does reflect, it is relevant for middle schoolers, even high schoolers. So I just want to give you an example, like I was in Micah Cano's ELA teacher. She has trapezoids and she also has their like rectangular tables. They've been in her room now for quite a while, a few years now. They were from elementary and she inherited them. They're working out beautifully. Those, I wouldn't even have to replace them. We discussed just the other day and today also. Getting the casters is going to make a world of difference. So when she's right now, and again, our middle school teachers, they teach various things, right? So she's an RTI teacher as well. Chrissy Valano's social studies, and she's also debate, and she's civic skill readiness. She does a lot. So her back to Micah, when Ms. Canos is doing her regular ELA class, and then the next class, she's got to switch into an RTI group. She quickly takes the tables now. It's not so quick right now because the desks are heavy. So the kids are dragging them across the floor, and they're making these configurations for a small group RTI experience. And that's like where, the shift happens because she doesn't have an RTI small therapy room or resource room type of environment for that. So she is loving it. She says, Allison, like my room right now just needs like a little touches here and there, like an interactive whiteboard that's on an easel so that she can kind of drag it to her instructional space when she's working in a small group because there's one dry erase board. So it's taking into account not just the furniture itself, but also like those movable easels, maybe another additional small whiteboard like that on the opposite end of the room so that there's not just one forward, we're looking up at just one wall in the room for direct instruction. So like those little enhancements over time, well, she has a big area rug. She says it's critical. Like she uses the area rug even for large 14-year-olds, and some of them are over 6 feet already. And they're like sprawled on the area rug while other kids are sitting on like the floor seats, but they are engaged. So it's not that the classroom is going to be loaded with like couches and plushies and like things like that, where, yeah, for some kids it would be a distraction perhaps, but it has to be done very thoughtfully and with like learning zones, different areas where there is an expectation, very explicit rules on how you engage in that particular learning zone, so that this way you're maximizing the engagement. So there's a lot of management and PD, of course, associated with that. But very relevant for middle schoolers, high schoolers. Back in 2017, I worked at Southern Westchester BOCES. Back in 2015, I think, is when they opened up their learning center, and they were like working with all districts within the community, including the campus that I worked at. We did the entire high school and our IDT program at the time, which is an intensive day treatment program. And they came in and they outfitted the entire the whole campus with flexible furniture. And it came with PD. And this was for, 14-year-olds and up. And it was just a game changer with engagement. It really was.
Okay. So, do you want to?
I just want to say, to answer your question, and it's kind of, Allison gave a nice example, but the research says if you don't change your modality of instruction, it's not going to have a positive effect. So the research shows if you change your modality of instruction and you're purposeful of how you use those spaces, and you provide instruction to students about the appropriate use of those spaces, then the data is pretty clear that students, both from an anecdotal data and from performance data, that students feel more comfortable, they're more engaged, they're higher active. We kind of mentioned it, but the meta-analysis of all the research does say, and that's why it's important for us to link the research to professional development. Before we purchase any item, the teacher needs to know how to do it, how to use it, and how instruction needs to change those spaces. So that's what an analysis of flexible classrooms would tell us.
So I just, so Greg, you definitely downplay your experience in this area. I've been fortunate enough to see what he was able to successfully implement in MAPAC, and I think you had data from that showing significant improvement in the ability for students to learn. But I would like to have you not only think about the furniture and the pedagogy, but also to think about the color of the walls, because there is a lot of research in like light pale colors, providing calmness. And also with all of our LED lights, maybe thinking about coverings for those lights to dampen that effect, because there is a lot of research around the impact of that on learning, especially for kids who are somewhere on the autism spectrum, and that has a negative impact, but you can very inexpensively put covers on the lights that will mitigate that situation. So I think I would love to see the whole room, not just the furniture.
I just thought this, just because like, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I didn't want to like throw all that research in here, but as I was uncovering and reading tons of articles, they kept reiterating that the classroom environment is not just the furniture and the instruction, it is all four, you're talking about your entire room, the floor, the walls, the colors matter, natural light, what you're seeing outside of your window. So if you're seeing a parking lot and you're not seeing green, that matters. So if you are seeing a parking lot, making sure that you are, and there's no green, bringing in plants. Plants make a big difference too in the classroom. So there's so much research just around the environment itself, not just instruction and furniture. So I'm so glad you brought that point.
Question? Yeah. Sorry that I came late, and thanks for the presentation. I just want to make sure that I know there's so many professional learning initiatives that we pile onto our personnel and our administration, and this seems like yet another. I'm sure it seems like it's one that people would welcome, but I just hope that there's enough space and time for that.
Yeah, Justin, thank you for that comment. It's why we want to start small. We have two people that want to engage in this work and pilot it that way. We don't want a big initiative. Everybody's going to do this, and we understand that. We're really working on our literacy right now, and our science of reading, and it's an all hands on deck. This is something that came from our students, came from some of our staff. It's something that we're exploring. It's something that teachers like to do anyway, but people who want to dive deeply, we really want to start with two people who've expressed interest in it, who want to dive deep and can share their experiences with others. So thank you for that. We recognize that while our teachers are working incredibly hard, doing incredible work, we do not want to, overload them with a huge all hands on deck initiative.
And just one last, sorry, I know it's soccer too. Just one last point that I do want to make is that a lot of the pedagogical shifts in terms of like project-based learning, constructivism, like so direct instruction versus like constructivism. All of our teachers are engaging in that right now. It'll just make their lives easier. It'll make it a little bit more seamless as we do this work. So much of the work is already happening. It's just not done with ease because of the nature of the fixed furniture, or just constraints that we are facing. So I just wanted to point that out too, because this isn't new. This has been around for many, many years. Our teachers are working in small groups. They're collaborating with students. Students are collaborating with each other. They're engaged in projects. They're doing it all. It's just how can we do it a little bit better and easier for our teachers and for our kids, and just really kind of maximize the entire environment. So we're looking at it all. Thank you.
Do you have any other questions? And thank you so much for the presentation. I will say this is one presentation of, I think, a couple of discussion items that link directly to next year's budget. So as we start seeing these things, I hope numbers follow them so they can make their way into finance committee discussions as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. And that brings us to our second board communication presentation. This is an initial discussion of the draft of the 2025-2026 school calendar. So you all have this in your packet. We have a copy here. Greg, am I correct that this has already gone to the calendar committee as well for review at least?
Yeah, it has. Thank you. And I shared with them. They were an approval of this. Again, this is a first draft for discussion. Our first look at it. Just a couple highlights. Given where the holidays fall, we are looking at 3 days of superintendent's conference days in August. Again, a little bit more time to work on some of the things we're talking about here. Also, we're looking at a potential 2-week break over the holidays. And last thing I would let everybody know is that that we, in this calendar, we have 4 snow days built into it. We usually have 5. We looked over the past 5 years. We've taken no more than 4 in any of those years. So we feel relatively comfortable including 4 snow days in this calendar. The one caveat that is that we can go over it. If you look at where the April break is, or the spring break is, it's pretty early in this calendar. It is, begins on March 30th and goes through the 3rd. So the back in session days, if we go over it by that time, would have to come off the April break. And sequentially back from the 2nd, the 3rd is Good Friday. So those are some of the things. The other thing I would say would be a half day instead of the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. In order to get the days in, it's a half day before Thanksgiving. And so that's our first run at the calendar for the 25-26 school year.
Can I just ask, you noted the Good Friday. I think it would be important to note the Chinese Lunar New Year, which does fall during the February break. But it would be nice to just note that on the calendar.
Absolutely, we can absolutely do that. Yeah, thank you for, this year we have Lunar New Year off, Asian New Year off. However, it falls on the break, and when it falls on the break, New York State says you don't have to take it off. But we can certainly make a note of that on the calendar, absolutely.
Questions, right? What was the reason for the April break to start at the end of March? For it to be so early?
It usually goes with Easter.
It goes with Easter, and the BOCES calendar, the region, all use this as the break, and we tie it to Good Friday and Easter. Just happens to fall a lot earlier this year, or next year than this year.
So if we do go over, then you take the 2nd of April, that would be quite awkward.
It would. I've experienced that once before. Luckily, we didn't go over where the spring break happened very early, like the end of March.
I don't think our attendance levels would be super high.
It says no irrevocable plan for that vacation. But yeah, that's the challenge. That's the one challenge. There's some opportunities in it, given some of the holidays fall within the break, and there's some challenges with it, particularly that you can still have snow days in April.
I would just say, I think the idea of a 2-week break around December is nice. As a parent of a younger kid, it's also a little daunting. So I know that, I don't feel necessarily strongly about it one way or the other, but I know that, that could be difficult for, a lot of families, especially 2 working parent families. So I would be interested if, we get any community feedback about that, now that we have the draft circulated, or teacher feedback about that. But, I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I just think we should make sure to flag it to the community as something that they'll have to plan for.
I think also it's important that we make sure we're mirroring our other districts, because we want to make sure we're not running buses off schedule compared to all of our other districts, because then we're just running some high school buses on days.
Yeah. So I will tell you again, it's a really good point. The region is mixed. The BOCES calendar does have the 22nd and 23rd as days in session. That is an option that the board can choose. We could engage our community. Would you like a 2-week break versus having those 2 days? I will tell you from an instructional standpoint, we've been discussing it in the region. For some of us, the day before the holiday break in December is not a day where a lot of kids' heads are in instruction, and when you have 2 days of instruction on the 22nd and 23rd, I don't know what kind of quality instruction that would be, and that's the concern that we had here. Otherwise, we could have those 2 days in session, but we would have to take 2 days off, somewhere else.
I think one thing you had mentioned before was that the other option could be to take some of that time right before Thanksgiving. Is that another option?
You could take a full day before Thanksgiving. That would give you 1 day that you would put back on the, maybe December 22nd, you're in for a day, but then you're in for a day. So it's a tricky calendar, but we can engage the community. Yeah, I don't know what attendance rate would be if I'm coming in for one day. And I will tell you that the last 2 days of this, when we came back the second and the third, we had pretty good attendance, but in every classroom there was 2 to 4 kids out. So that's the other thing about having on the 22nd and 23rd in session. We're also concerned about how many students would actually be here and what kind of quality instruction. Because if we give those days as instructional days, we have to realize that the quality of instruction and which kids are going to actually miss instruction. So that's something we took into account here.
Yeah.
But we can engage the community. We can put out a survey. We can engage the community if the board thinks that would be helpful. I'd be happy to speak to that.
I don't necessarily think that we need to do a survey or anything. I think, this serves as a good forum to get some of that out. But, I love the idea of a 2-week break for me, but, I know that it is a double-edged sword sometimes as well.
I would honestly let that decision a lot rest with our staff, whether they wish to.
Do we know what a valley needle call management?
Well, I will tell you this, I don't want to, they're still in discussions and everybody's calendar is like us. I will tell you that it's mixed in the region. I don't want to speak for them before they speak publicly on it, but I can tell you some of our colleagues may have the 2-week off and some may not. At least that's where they're leaning right now. I'm sure they're having very similar discussions that we are. So this one's mixed. Just like this year, some of our southern districts had 2 weeks off and we came back for the 2 days. So I think it's going to be a mixed bag. And I think it's just about if you need to have those days in session, or if you think that it's better served to have those be instructional days somewhere else.
What would the contingency plan be if we had a snowstorm after the break?
If we ran out of snow days, yeah, we would probably, if we're getting close to it, I would say to you that the 20 to 27th, which is a professional development day, you could turn that into a day of instruction. If you're at that point in the school year and you're out of snow days, that is something you could do. You could, alert the community ahead of time and turn a superintendent's conference day into instructional day.
What day is that?
That's, you're looking at March 27th. Are you saying that if we get into like April 6th and we have a snowstorm?
Right, let's say we have a snowstorm April 13th.
I mean, I think at that point you're adding in June 26th.
Yeah, we could add in June 26th to the calendar. Since we don't have to worry about regents and rating days, we could add the 26th into the calendar.
And this does cover us through the regions for the vision.
It does.
I mean, you're more likely to have a power outage from a thunderstorm or tornado.
Right. But I think by mid-March to end of March, we have a pretty good sense of what we still have in terms of the closure days that are still on the calendar, and we can make decisions around then saying, if we have another day, the 26th would be a day in a session, or we could say the 27th, if we're before March 27th, we could turn that into instruction. I've seen that.
Could we have an option of a remote day?
We could look into that. I don't know if we have a remote plan for that.
We do have our remote plan, but I don't know the quality of instruction for a 1-day remote.
And remember, as long as we have the equivalent of 900 and 990.
Right, so it's not days anymore.
It's not days anymore. And I can tell you right now, we looked at this calendar, we are well over in terms of, instead of 990, you have well over 1,000 for the secondary, and we have well over 1,000 for the elementary as well. So we're this calendar builds in a lot of the of that requirements for city.
Any other questions on the calendar? All right, we'll see this again. That brings us to item C, a discussion on regionalization. All right, Greg's going to talk a little bit about what visualization is. I think we've all heard a little bit about it. It's been buzzing in the area. The big question for us tonight really is, do we want to stay in or opt out? This was a mandatory requirement put forth by the commissioner, and it is no longer mandatory due to other boards lobbying against regionalization. So, Greg, briefly tell us?
Yeah, thank you.
about the
I'll
site
briefly,
visualization?
New York State Education Department was looking for ways to have a mechanism in which school districts can collaborate and share resources to provide equity amongst students in different districts. And what they started to do is try to collect some data, and they put out a requirement that school districts complete a survey. At this point, it wasn't a hot topic in the news. I completed the survey for the district. It's really the survey on its own, wasn't asking any earth-shattering questions, and it gave us an opportunity to share with the New York State Education Department in a small district like us, in a fringe rural district, some of our limitations, given our size and given our resources. So we didn't think much of it, but as in the news recently, some school districts and school boards and superintendents were concerned that there were some mandates that you had to participate in it. And what it would do is start to take away local control. I think there was some fear that they were going to mandate Garrison needs to share their force with everybody or something with everybody, and the school board and the community would not have a say. That has since been changed. The Commissioner of Education said no one is mandated to be part of this. You can opt out at any time. And so what we have the opportunity and the board needs to deliberate is we've committed to the survey, which we already submitted. The second part is that you would be engaging or allowing me to engage in the region with the Putnam North and Westchester BOCES districts and their DS, Boyle, in conversations around planning and things that will help all of us. So we can opt out right now and let the state education department know that we can opt out, or we continue. There's another place to opt out as well. Once the plan is developed that we're part of and have discussions, and I will certainly work with the community with what those are. If we don't like the plan, we can opt out at that time. But I think it's important that the board deliberate and have an opportunity to decide whether or not they want to participate in these A, discussions, and then B, we can talk about what the plan is and then decide, and you can decide as a school board if you want to participate.
This has been a very hot topic with the Westchester Putnam School Board Association in terms of meetings with them as to what different districts are saying about this. For us, we do a lot of this. Everything I've heard people wondering about or concerned about, we're already doing. We, tuition out to high schools, we share resources with Haldane, we have contracts in place. We're looking to save money and optimize what our students experience every day anyway. And I haven't seen anything in what I've heard from other districts or what I've read from what the commissioners issued that suggests that it will take away a lot of local control. I understand the fear of that because it wasn't very well defined initially. However, I think it's just a way to make sure that we're getting the best outcomes for kids. And especially if we continue to have off ramps, it's something I'm comfortable with continuing to explore. I don't think anyone's going to force us to do anything, taking tax dollars out of our system and putting them into another system. So I think that's just been a lot of fear in my perspective, but I'm curious to hear what other people think, and if anyone wishes to opt out.
My gut instinct is what you said. I mean, we're a small district. We can learn from others and gain efficiencies, which will help us. And if there's off ramps, something really like that, great.
We have consensus to stay in and see where this leads, and if at any point, Brendan, if you just keep us updated on how these conversations go and what plans come about, and we will review them then. Maybe it will save us money and increase better outcomes for kids. Who knows? All right, that brings us to our next discussion, which is the SRO, that one, SPO discussion. So we've had this discussion in the past. Why is it coming back? There's a couple of reasons right now. The first is, as we mentioned with the furniture, we're about to start budget season, which is a very exciting time, everyone's favorite time. So we want to hear about what items should we be looking for in the budget? The second is, Greg brought it to Dan and I's attention that the teachers union was interested and would support having either an SRO or an SPO in the district. I want to thank the union for really following the appropriate channels to bring this forward, and I really appreciate that. So I think we, in turn, should have a really good discussion, think about, nothing's being decided tonight, but really think about how this fits in our community, what's changed since our previous discussions, what information we as a board need. That does include numbers. Bryce put together some really interesting information as to where we go from here, basically. So I'm gathering thoughts. This is an ongoing discussion, and of course, will lead into everyone's favorite topic of budget. Greg, tell you.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to start to engage in this important discussion. As many of you know, school safety is a concern, not just for Garrison, all school districts have had these ongoing conversations about incidents of gun violence and other violence in schools that we see in the news. As everybody knows, there's 2 such incidents that happen in the school year. So it's important that we have this discussion. I know that, as you said, the Teachers Association, the GTA, raised the issue of, should we be looking at a school resource officer or a special patrol officer from the Putnam County Sheriff's Department? We are currently the only district without an SRO and SPO in Putnam County. So it's important that we have this discussion. I shared with the board, as you said, Sarah, some research that it's mixed. The presence of SROs can enhance school safety. It can deter but not eliminate gun violence or threats, but it does limit the impact of the threats. It can foster a secure environment. It can, with the right person, it can build good relationships between students and an SRO. However, there's some research that highlights some adverse effects and the potential for increased arrests for minor infractions, particularly at the high school level, or the possibility of creating a more punitive environment. So the research is pretty clear that it's mixed. And I know that, as you said, the Garrison board had this discussion, and I reviewed it in January and February of 2020, and they expressed some legitimate concerns that are probably still concerns at this time. So, I think given the mixed data and the mixed findings and the mixed feelings about it, it's critical to engage in this dialogue with our community and stakeholders. This should be the beginning of that conversation, but we should probably need more information from all our community members, parents, guardians, students, teachers, to understand everyone's perspectives and concerns. But ultimately, this decision should be made by the community, the board, and everyone's input is invaluable as we try to figure out what the best outcome is.
I'm going to jump in with one question to sort of launch us on this discussion for tonight, and then open it up to anyone else who has questions or thoughts they wish to share. The first question I'm going to ask you, Greg, is can you define for everybody the difference between an SRO and an SPO? I know for many people that is very apparent, but just in case.
So an SRO, a school resource officer, is an active police officer specifically trained to work in schools that has specific parameters. They actually do some education. Typically, they only get involved with, law enforcement infractions violations if there is a, something that requires an arrest, but typically administration starts that process. A special patrol officer is something completely different. That is and they have to be, and the Putnam County Sheriff's Department has this articulated, they have to be retired, either state, local, police, so they have to have training and background as a peace officer, and they have to abide by those rules. Their role is not as much education, their role, and SRO's role is as well, but their role is really to be another person on your safety team, to make sure your perimeter is secure, not just for the God forbids, but also just, to be another set of eyes and ears to make sure things are safe. To greet people, to maybe help with traffic control, but also to check, make sure doors aren't shut, If there was an incident, help with fire evacuation, if there was animals, which we've had to help and secure people's safety that way. The difference is, the special patrol officer really isn't involved in the education and counseling and emergency counseling. It's just talking about the profession of police officers and making good choices. That's not really a special patrol officer's role. That's more of an SRO.
Can you also speak very broad terms for the budgetary difference?
Yeah, there's a huge budgetary difference. I am working with Sheriff McConville to get some actual hard numbers, but I will tell you that, and I've run the program in Mayapack and have overseen SROs and SPOs, so I do know it very well. And I will tell you that you can spend well over $100,000 for a school resource officer because you are defraying costs that it is for the sheriff's department. It's well over 100 benefits and all of that. Since safety patrol or special patrol officers are retired folks, they can only make a certain amount. They can each only make $35,000 a year. So back of the envelope numbers, we would require approximately 2 to cover us 5 days a week for 180 days. So it could be no more than $70,000. So you're talking probably a difference of $30,000 to $40,000. But I don't have hard numbers, but that's kind of the edge of the envelope sort of numbers that we have for that. The other thing I will say, they are not employees. We do not, for special office patrol officers, there's no benefits that the cost gets defrayed to us. They're not our employees. But we do have an MOU with them that talks about what their roles and responsibilities and where our jurisdiction lies versus where their jurisdiction lies.
Open up for questions, thoughts that you should share.
Yeah. Just drilling down on the MOU and sort of what everybody's roles and responsibilities are. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the reporting authority of the SPO, SRO within the school? Because I think it's important that we understand that they're not employees, which is maybe good from a benefit standpoint, but it also means that they're reportable to somebody outside of the building as well. So they have to report to the sheriff's office, for example. What does that mean? What are the implications of that in terms of, can you or can maybe instruct them to do something like, My Neighbor's Dare, or do like once a quarter kind of safety instruction, do traffic control? How much authority does our administration have over how these individuals are spending their time in the school day, and on a daily basis? Because obviously, we're talking about having somebody in the school full time. It's a lot of time that they would be here. Obviously, I think we all share the safety concerns, but God willing, those safety incidents are very rare, and on a daily basis, those people are going to be in the building. What are they going to be doing?
It's a really good point, Dan, and let me answer it this way. One is they're just a part of your safety portfolio, to your point, and how do you utilize them so that they become useful during the day? Most of us will never have an issue of school violence that happens, and that's great, but it's a piece of it. So I can tell you my experiences. When they're here, they follow what we need them to do as long as it's within the scope of what they're allowed to do with their role. So if we say to them, listen, and we'll have to drill down a little bit deeper and do a little bit more research. Like an SRO, we can say, yeah, we want you to run programs here and here and here, and I've done this with them, and they go into high school classes and they talk about, for high school, like the dangers of being intoxicated and driving, and they do education stuff like that. Obviously, that's not what we're talking about here with middle school, but school resource officers in elementary schools can do about fire safety and other kind of safety and how to have a plan if something happens at home, or what to do about, if you're lost. They can do that, and I've seen them do that. It's really, Dan, ask them to help with arrival or drop off. I've worked with SPOs and we've done that as well. They really, have well within the scope. While they're here, they take directive from us. If there's an issue with something we ask them to do, it's not in the scope of their work, then that's usually where their supervisor of the SRO program would call me and we would talk about it. So I've never seen an issue. I think the issues come more at the high school level with SROs and when with arrests and things like that. I don't know that that would be the issue that we see here. Does that answer kind of what? Yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful.
So, Putnam County, all the schools have one of these. But I would say that we're a little bit different than the other schools. County, I'm curious what the role of the SRO hall is. My daughter goes, I see him around the high school. Is he in middle school? Is he in the elementary school? I'm noticing that most of the elementary schools do not have SROs, they have SPOs. So can you give a little bit of a color about what you think might be the best? If we were going to do this, like would it be, do we really need an SRO, an SPO situation?
Yeah, having had a MAPAC, I'm just giving you my experience. We didn't have SROs in our elementary school, right? We had SPs, and it was great. They helped with arrival, they say hi to kids, they made sure we're safe. They were part of our safety team, and they were another set of eyes in this from a safety perspective. Not just for the God forbids of that. So I would say the plus our middle school is so small, and they pack our middle school and high school campus on the same campus. So I think every district kind of would think about what they need to keep them safe. And I would say to you here, I think an SRO would be too much. I think if we were to consider this and the community said, we're concerned about safety and we would like another component of our safety portfolio, I would suggest that an SPO would probably be, if anything, would be the best approach to do it.
Greg, can you speak to like how many incidents over the last X number of years, or do you know, or could we find out, where an SRO or an SPO would have changed the outcome for the better? I'm curious.
Yeah, I don't know about Garrison, but I know the FBI keeps data on that stuff, and there is a report that, if I haven't already shared with you in the research that came out from the Department of Justice that will to speak to just to that. I can just tell you, without the data in front of me, the data suggests that it doesn't stop or reduce the incidences of it, but it can limit the impact. That's what the Department of Justice report showed in the research.
To Kent's point, sorry, Jennifer, on, looking at other neighboring districts, we are very different. One that we mentioned in our previous discussion is Hampton Hills, because we are also pre-K. They added one in 22. Do you have an opportunity to find out more about what their school resource officer is doing, or is there an opportunity for us to speak with their superintendent and find out?
Yeah, Sarah, thank you. I do have an email and a call into him, and I'll actually see him this week at a meeting, and I'll have an opportunity to actually catch him. I'm sure he's pretty busy, but I did read their article, and that was in their paper, and how they utilize. They do have an SRO, so an active person. They have a local police department, so some districts have their local police department that they can ask to provide an SRO for. We don't have that opportunity. Our only opportunity is with the sheriff's department. But I will talk to Rich, their superintendent, and I will get some more information for you regarding the impact and what decision they made, how they made it. I think that's a good comparison district to look at.
Could we also find out from Carl if he has any information about how Haldane uses their SRO vis-a-vis the elementary school specifically?
Absolutely. I've met with their SRO, and we've had, and other things, having conversations, because one of the things we do collaborate with the sheriff's department on all our emergency response plans, and they need to have access to it. So he came and spoke with us, but I can speak with Carl, and we can speak about how they utilize the SRO, SPO resources over time. Absolutely.
So I wonder if having an SPO or an SRO helps us in the case of emergency, like a health emergency. Does it get help here faster because it's a direct line? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Sarah.
Oh, I just wanted to say, in light of the whole conversation, I want to just emphasize that the sheriff's department has been very responsive to us in any crisis. Most of what we have is like, last year we had a there. And they sent someone. I don't know what was going to happen to the poor deputy who face the bear. But, like, they are very responsive, and we really do thank them for all that they do on a daily basis. And I know when we did hit, I know we were just talking earlier about these meetings initially happened before COVID, and the health department was so good in Putnam County with us during COVID. It felt like we had that direct. So that is something we've been so fortunate about.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the sheriff's department has been really responsive with simple traffic issues that I've called the sheriff for. When we had the incident that we let the community know about in our neighbors in Putnam Valley, I was in communication. So they've been very communicative. So getting a hold of the sheriff's department, to your point, Sarah, hasn't been the issue. But I will say that those people are trained in first response, emergency response. You know, as part of the requirement, whether you're an SRO or an SPO, as a first responder, there is some training that they have and have to have that training in order to respond to an emergency on scene.
It just makes me think of like the TV shows where like they have the inside line to say, this is who I am, and you don't have to first explain anything. You know, I need this dispatched immediately, you don't have to explain anything. That's an extra level of protection and security and response for our students by having that quote unquote insider.
We can certainly ask the question of the sheriff's department, does that enhance in any way response time or not? Is it a non-issue?
I would hope that they privilege everyone equally and equitably, not one.
Right, but like when I recently had to call 911 for something, and they asked me who I am, where I'm located, I can't say I'm so-and-so, this is my number, and they already know who I am. That's what I mean, like, oh, I'm just saying, like, if I've been with someone who's a police officer, when they call in, they say, this is my badge number, I need X, Y, and Z, and they don't go through that first set of questions that they ask me. And if that's a matter of 2 or 3 minutes, that could be life or death, that maybe that's a consideration, if it's true, it might not be true. But like I call the non-emergency number, or I call 911, you know, 911 around here is kind of just, can get one part of the county or another, and then I don't know where Garrison is.
So just to be clear, so SROs and SPOs are both armed?
They are from the Putnam County Sheriff's Department.
Can I ask just a question? Have we been unhappy with our safety team?
No,
Or
not
are we concerned that they're not doing an effective enough job, and that's why this is coming up?
When you say safety team, you're referring to our
The
building
district-
level safety
yeah,
team?
well, the district safety team, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's just who this personnel would be added to that team.
Right, no, they're doing a remarkable job. The teachers and, you know, nurse and administrators that said do a remarkable job. So again, it's adding to the portfolio. It's not that it's another piece of the whole safety profile that a lot of districts have wanted to consider. The reason, Jocelyn, it's being brought up because it was brought to my attention early in the fall. So it's being brought up here for a discussion because the teachers associations have said, look, we've had this discussion before. There continues to be acts of school violence that we all read in the news. Is it something that you can share with the Board of Education and community for discussion? So that's why we're here, not because we're unhappy, but it adds another layer to that safety portfolio that we just currently don't have, that other districts do have.
I have a probably more statement than question. So I've done a lot of homework on this over the past few days since I was aware this was going to be an issue. And so one of the things I did was I called a retired state trooper who I know who also does 1 day a week as a school safety officer. So I wanted to get his opinion about these things. And it's pretty insightful. He, among other things, his main point was, sure, having an SRO or an SPO can be a deterrent. Sure. Not always, but it can be. He also acknowledged that not all of them are good, and that you really have to be very considerate about what you're hiring for. And he said one of the other real challenges with the job is that it's dreadfully boring, and it's not something that a lot of people actually want to do, and so that makes it even harder to find the right person. So those are all factors and that we would need to think about if we started to move down this path. He did also say a few other things that I found interesting. One was that the district that he works in routinely at off times, sorry, let me backtrack for 1 second. He also said it's not necessarily important to have somebody full-time. He said that one of the options that he has seen districts pursue is to have someone who comes sporadically, unpredictably, right? And so you pay half time, but also that makes, any potential bad actor or outside observer never know when security is there and therefore just kind of give up. So that's something else to consider. The other things he raised were that in the district he works in, or that he consults for part-time, is that every so often the police come through and do sort of, security check every so often, right? And whenever that happens, a lot of parents get upset and they say, why are the police in the school? My kids are scared. What's going on? Because they come unannounced, basically, right? So he said, really the most important things you can do are, before you even go down this road, are education, right? So we're all here for it. So, so if you do get an SRSPO, he said one of the things you should think about is, is there an instructional element to that job? And the reason is because if you can instill with the kids that police officers are there to help you, they're not there to scare you. And if you can start that learning from a very early age, that can be really helpful. And then he raised 2 other things, and I actually brought these up with him, but he confirmed them without hesitation. There are two things that every district can and should be doing, and I don't know if we do these things. One is regular communications about firearm safety. He said there's nothing wrong with, and you should do every year or every 6 months, whatever it may be, communications with the community that say, hey, if you have a firearm at home, you need to make sure that it is locked away, that it's secured, that it's away from your kids. There was a study that looked at, and one of the studies I found showed that most parents who own firearms believe that their children do not know where the firearms are kept or where the ammunition is kept. And the lion's share of those cases, the kids know exactly where the firearm is and where the ammunition is kept. So we like to delude ourselves about these things sometimes. So regular communication about firearm safety is free. So that's something that we can and should do. And then the second thing was that most, I think it was like 93%, 94% of shooters who were students or were not, communicated their intent before they actually did anything, whether it was to another person or whether it was on social media. And in those cases, they were largely ignored. And so it is, I think it is up to us also to create a culture of listening. And when those people are in crisis, that somebody says something. And if you, I found this for something I was doing for work, but it's totally unrelated, but it was a PSA that the Sandy Hook Promise organization put out. It's an organization that formed to curtail gun violence after Sandy Hook. And I encourage everybody to look for this on YouTube. It's a 2-minute PSA. It's called Just Joking. And it is absolutely spine-chilling about all of the warning signs that were there that people ignored. So I think there's some really low-hanging fruit here that we can, just things that we can do that are free, that are impactful now, such as education about, police officers and that they're here to help you, number 1. Number 2, communication about firearm safety, because there are plenty of people in this community who own firearms, and I don't recall ever having seen a communication from the school about this, about making sure that they're secured and that they're safe and away out of kids' hands. And the third thing is creating a culture of listening to people who are expressing cries for help. And so I discussed these with the former state trooper, and he said those 3 things are more impactful than almost anything else you can do. Now, he said, look, I'm still a fan of, or I'm still a believer in deterrence in the presence of an SR or an SPO. But he said, you gotta nail those three things first. And so I just wanted to put that out there as things that we really should be thinking about. Is very easy, basically free things to do that would have a bigger impact than almost anything.
Definitely start with some of those. Thank you. Do you have any other questions or comments on this?
Just one other comment, and somewhat off of Eric's point. I think obviously the safety of the building, as I said before, is paramount, and I certainly appreciate the Teachers Association making known that it's important to them. I think, just speaking personally, it's, of course, it's always a question of how are we best allocating resources. I think, at least for me, my instinct is always to put as much of our resources as we can into the educational mission, into direct educational support. But obviously, if there is a sense that this is necessary to facilitate that mission, then that's something I think we have to take very seriously. I also think in the discussions about this and in some of the research that you shared, Greg, there's a little bit of there's a sort of dual discussion about the point of an SRO or an SPO. And on the one hand, you hear about sort of crisis response and firearms in school and school shootings and that kind of thing. And then on the other hand, you hear about school discipline and SROs or SPOs being used in the discipline of students. Of course, those can overlap, but I think some of the negative, some of the research that talks about a negative consequence of SPOs or SROs is really in, I think, what seems like the overuse of those officers in what may have previously been disciplinary actions that were handled by either administration or staff. And this is, I think, a building that is very non-punitive. Obviously we focus a lot on SEO and on social emotional learning and wellness and all those things. And I think it's very important that if we are going to consider doing this, that we very clearly differentiate what we think is the role of the SRO or SPO in the discipline of students in the building, or the lack of their role in that. And that it doesn't change the sort of fundamental culture of the building as being a place that is non-punitive, at least in the first instance, that is understanding of neurological diversity, all those sorts of things, and that we don't lean on an SRO or SPO to handle those things when we would otherwise. So I think it would be very important for us to put some of this in writing and make sure we have clearly delineated roles or clear description of what the SPO or SRO's role is in the discipline of students.
Is that really even possible? Like if a police officer sees an action they believe is a crime, they're going to act on it. We don't have the ability to say, we don't want you to enforce this level of crime in school. That's what I would do. I don't think you really have control of that. Once you pull that out of the bottle.
I think that is a concern, and that's sort of why I was asking about who they report to, because, and I think there's some of this in the research, that it does create there's a different chain of command, right? So when you have those incidents that arise in school that might be criminal in nature, then that is dealt with as a police matter, and maybe in some instances correctly dealt with as a police matter, but maybe that it increases the rate at which things that happen within the school are dealt with as a police matter rather than as a disciplinary matter within the school. And that, of course, has consequences for the students that are involved. I think as a pre-K through 8, that's probably lower incidence here, and maybe you can differentiate that, some of these things are going to be, a lot of what happens is probably non-criminal in nature, whether it's vaping or, whatever it is. And I don't know what the right line is for what is the role of an SPO versus, what we expect our teachers to deal with from a disciplinary standpoint or the administration. But I just think we need to be very thoughtful about how we try and establish those boundaries, and maybe it's an iterative process that we, need to adjust on an annual basis, but,
I agree. I also think, think about this kind of part of it. Someone we might want to engage in the conversation going forward. There's a youth coordinator for Putnam County
Yes.
who runs the youth court. And the youth court starts at age 12. So they might be an interesting where students who have, say, a charge for vaping or something go before a group of their peers. And one of their peers represents them, a peer is the judge, and they, the trial is all with children, essentially. So that might be somebody we can get involved in the conversation of what they do with the line of discipline and might be able to help us answer some of those questions in addition to.
Yeah, we can get anybody that we want to do our due diligence, and the thing that I can share with the board and community is just my experience with the Putnam County Sheriff's Department, having done it. So,
Can I ask a couple of quick questions?
Sure.
I believe that we allow the sheriff's department to have 24-hour access by video and closed circuit television. So they are already here. Right?
They're not like logged in all the time, and that was part of that
Oh, we
discussion.
can't,
We
so
set up that.
they have a serious presence here, by being able to monitor.
They,
in an active,
I don't
and
think they log in.
they don't log in live to just check on things, that they don't do. They don't do patrols of like videos to see if doors are open. What they do in a crisis situation, they can have access to it, they have access to the building, but they cannot access it just whenever they feel like it as a precautionary measure, that they can't do.
And even if we were to contract with SRO SBOs, that wouldn't change the video surveillance.
I think that would be in the language of whatever memorandum of agreement that we set up. Is that when we set up the memorandum of agreement for that videos, it was very specific with checks on who's looking at it. And so like, yeah, somebody's not sitting in a patrol car out there across the county watching, unless they have a bear, it's interesting.
Are there any other options too, like, maybe the answer is no, but would it be possible to work with the sheriff's office to just ask them to come by more often in a sporadic way, doing, some sort of, what we call light, sort of checking in, making sure things are okay, that doesn't involve hiring, managing someone, have someone with a gun in our school.
We actually understood, yeah, we can definitely ask them. I have, and even this year, and when they can spare resources, they have been very generous, and, yeah, we'll put a patrol car down there to make sure no one's speeding while we have kids coming. And at the same time, in full transparency, they'll tell me like, but if there's an emergency somewhere and I need to call them, we can't do that. And so they've been very generous, but they also are dealing with limited resources and how to allocate those. But the sheriff's department has been very supportive of us when we need them.
Is there a precedent for an SPO not being armed? And the reason I ask this is because I think that's sort of the elephant in the room, right? It's do you want to introduce someone with a firearm to the school to a certain extent, right? And part of the other reason I ask this is I spoke to my nephews who grew up in Minnesota, and they're up to 8th grade. They had an SPO there who was not armed, but did also have, I assume, a taser or something like that, a non-lethal weapon of some kind to subdue a bad actor, but the person was not armed. Is there any precedent for that you're aware of?
We can ask the sheriff's department. The only precedent that I know of personally is that some districts secure outside security firms who typically have retired officers that work for security firms and bring them in, and they're not. So there are districts that utilize security firms. The training and all of that's another discussion, but typically with those, they're retired officers that act as security guards at So there are tons of options that I can propose.
So related to what you're even bringing up the point of having a firearm or weapon in school. I think what I'm still unclear on is what is the goal of such an individual added to the school community. And so, for example, if the goal is people want there to be a gun in the school that can help deploy, they can deploy it on other people coming in, then that's very clear. But I don't know that that's the goal. Another example, is the goal to help with traffic and to be a mentor? If that's the goal, I don't know that an armed police officer is the best personnel for it. Maybe there's another person that we spend $100,000 on. So I'm unclear from all from the union, admin, and parents, right, and board members, what is the goal of adding this person?
So I think that brings up an interesting question, sort of how do we take the questions we have here and really hone in on some answers? So one thought would then be to take this, we've initiated the conversation here at this level, obviously it's going to continue into other meetings, but do we want to form like, just to help me with the word, an ad hoc, I don't know, a task force, that's what I'm not looking for committee, we don't want to charge, we want a task force. That brings together community members who want to share their voice, the teachers union representatives, board members, as long as there are 3 or less of you who wish to share your voices. To really, I meet with the sheriff who has volunteered this time to come and answer very specific questions and then report back to this larger forum as well. So that we can really hone in on what is the goal, how do we accomplish it, what are those next steps, what other questions do we need to have answered?
Yeah, because 5 years ago when this was discussed. And that's it. And then it didn't go anywhere. Well, it was discussed and it was decided, we don't need this at this time. So just making sure you highlight what has possibly changed, what needs of ours have changed, that this might not end the same way it did 5 years ago.
I agree. I actually, because I want to make clear, I'm not opposed to the idea. I'm not for it either. I just think we don't know enough. There's a lot of research. We don't know what our goals are. And again, that state trooper I spoke to, he said sometimes it's just as simple as educating, teachers and staff not to prop a door open, right? And there's lots of really basic things that, or not even educating, just reminding that like bad habits can sometimes lead to bad outcomes, right? So it's, I think we need to better understand what our goals are, what we really want to achieve, really hear from the community about what they want us to achieve. And I think we can all really align together on the best path forward, as opposed to saying, yes, we do need this, no, we don't, maybe there's middle ground. I think we all really need to figure out what it is we want to achieve.
I think because this began really with the union reaching out to us on what they wanted, to really hone in on what they want and what meets their goals as well. So that we are making sure we are not going off in a different direction. So that would be my recommendation, is to get a task force up. This doesn't need like a charter or anything, we can just go with it, right? All right.
Yeah, I think it's important that this is something like a school board discussion where we're talking to people about strong opinions, but we don't know what's there. They should have a discussion. This is a silly way to do this, but it'd be much better to have a forum where you all could express your opinions and tell us what you're thinking. That would be much more productive.
Great. This one, but people hate it. I'm so excited. All right, so let's start with the task force. Let's see who's interested from the union. Get it out to parents as well, and make sure we get community members involved in this as well. We can put a notice out. Anyone who wants to join, board members, please let me know if you are interested. We will keep it to 3 or less. And whoever's interested will hash it out that way. So. All right, I'm gonna then go ahead and move us on from this discussion. Thank you all for the research, the time, and the thoughts on this. I really appreciate it. This brings us to our first public comment for the evening. Okay, public comment is intended for members of the community to speak openly and voice concerns. In accordance with policy 1510 of the Garrison Union Free School District, any person wishing to speak shall comply with all provisions of this policy. Comments about specific school personnel or individual students is a violation of board policy.
Concerns regarding students or personnel should be discussed privately with the superintendent or appropriate administrator. Comments should be limited to 3 minutes, and speakers are asked to conduct themselves in a respectful manner. The board will listen to comments, but will not engage in dialogue. Any necessary follow-up will be noted and provided through the appropriate channel. Members of the public wishing to comment during board meetings are asked to place their name and town of residence on the sign-in sheet. Commenters will be invited to the podium to address the board. Sign-in sheet? Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and move on. There'll be another opportunity.
I'll say
for-
something.
Oh, great. Sorry. Okay. It's exciting.
Hi, Grady Oaks, Garrison, father of a perpetually tardy, but well-fed from Atlas Chili. She bought a hot cocoa machine this morning, that's a problem. I just want to say, I appreciate the quality of the questions that you guys were asking up here. I think when I heard about this, like I'll admit kind of a visceral response to it, but sitting here and then I look at Nurse Melissa, like candidly, one of my first thoughts was, as the father of perpetually tardy fourth grader, I get to look at Nurse Melissa every morning, and Mrs. Clark gives Poppy a hug, and that's who greets her every morning. And Nurse Melissa was also greeting her in our community through the pandemic, through windows, testing people, putting herself out there, when a lot of other people didn't have the guts to do things like that or do it. And so it gets my attention when the Teachers Association is asking for us to pay attention to this. We should listen to them, right? And I'm really grateful that you guys talked about a dialogue. I was thinking about the budget workshops that you had in the past, how effective those were. I think just to get the ideas out there and to flush them. And, you know, I'm a sales leader by profession. One of the things that I tell my managers is people know the things that you talk about repeatedly. You know, not the things that you talked about a year ago or 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And it sounds like there was a deep conversation about it. Maybe there's a chance to revisit it, but I appreciate what the teachers union was saying. I appreciate what people are saying up here. Personally, like I think about the anxiety that so many of the students experience through the pandemic. And I have real concerns about what that means when you greet somebody every day that is and that hasn't done. I think about the desensitization that kids have to authority. And I think about a lot of people that I knew, that I grew up with, had SPOs, who had SROs that found their way into plenty of trouble. I think about the rural nature of our district. I think about the budgetary challenges that we have. But I really think about our kids' safety. I think staff safety, kids' safety, what we ask teachers to do, first and foremost, but really think that the idea of opening up a broader dialogue where there can be people in the community is the way to go. And I appreciate the quality of the questions. I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to speak? Okay. Now we're going to close public comment, but there will be another instance of public comment later in the meeting. All right, we're going to move on to the fun part. We're going to accept the minutes. Be it resolved, Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District does hereby accept the minutes of the regular workshop business meeting of December 11th, 2024 as presented. May I have a motion, please? Second. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments on the minutes as presented, please? Great. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions? Thank you. Next, we move on to the approval of CSE, CPSE recommendations. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District approved the Committee on Special Education, CSE, and the Committee on Preschool Special Education, CPSE recommendations and student placements. May I have a motion, please?
Motion.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions? Next, we come to a second reading and approval of policy 5661 wellness.
Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District, upon the recommendation of Policy Committee Chair Jennifer Harrington Wilson, does hereby approve Policy 5661 as presented. May I have a motion, please?
Second.
Thank you. Now, there were some questions and comments on this, so we're going to pause here for a discussion on this policy. All right, Jennifer, I'm going to turn it over to you as Policy Committee Chair for some of the questions.
What this policy was we had a policy and our policy service recommended we update the policy in a number of places, and this is a carryover from last year. And we sent it to the attorney a few times. Dr. Stoll met with Ms. Melissa to review some of the pieces of it. And we brought it for a first reading last meeting, but we realized that we missed one area that was revised in the policy that was adopted in 2022, but we missed making that change in this policy. And that's, I'm not quite sure.
Seven.
Page 7
Of the
of the document.
And it's letter H, Jen.
It's letter H, which states having lunch hours and recess periods to better support learning and healthy eating. Being that we are such a small school, and in the previous policies, it stated that, it did not state that. And
It is struck from the.
it wasn't struck from the language was changed. And I think it said when possible.
When possible.
Because being that I know we like to keep the gym open and with the scheduling and the size of the school, it isn't always possible to have recess before lunch. But what I would recommend to the board is we just strike it all together. Because to say when possible, not really the purpose of the policy, it's to say what is going to happen, not what can happen. So I would make the recommendation that on page 7, we strike renumbered each, which says having lunch following the recess period, better support learning.
Instead of asking that we make sure the schedule allows for recess before lunch.
I don't think we could schedule it here, I can let Greg speak to that. It's never been the schedule that
Right,
is it for
right.
every grade level, right? I would say we would leave it up to the building administration to set the schedule, knowing that every student would get recess. Okay.
Yeah, it is not possible to make sure that every grade has a recess period before the lunch, just for staffing, for supervision, and how we have to run it. We would have to create multiple lunch periods, increase the lunch periods that we have in order to make that actually feasible. Some years you'll have recess before lunch, and some years you won't, but to have a policy that says you're gonna kind of do that as a matter of course, it's just not what we can do right now.
The previous policy said whenever possible, having lunch following the recess period. So I don't know how the board feels, if they'd rather add whenever possible, or just strike it.
Whenever possible, though, just brings up what Greg just said. I mean, it is possible, but it's very disruptive to.
Right,
to
right, so that's why I was
school.
suggesting that.
Does leaving it in at least provide knowledge to staff, personnel, and teachers, like, oh, this can be a good thing to consider. You know what I mean, like by deleting it altogether, everyone might forget in a year that actually the research suggests it's better to have recess before.
Well, that's where I would trust our administrators to know that and continue doing what they're doing, because we do have recess before lunch for a number of programs.
Mm-hmm. It's really up to admin, is what we're saying.
Right.
It's not up to anyone else. Right?
No, well, policy, if the board wants it to be a policy whenever possible, that's really the purview of the board. Purview of the board. However, as administration, what we're telling you is that we know, given our current staffing and the number of grades we have, the number of supervision we have, that we know that there's going to be some times where grades have it and sometimes that's just physically what we can do.
I think we've generally done policy with not having things in there that we don't mean that it's not a policy if we say, policy's not there to remind us of something to think about. I mean, but like, you know, it's,
Well, this whole policy has just things to think about, and it's not necessarily.
And there's no way to enforce homework process. Like, how do you determine?
Yeah, we don't even enforce 20-minute lunches. Just letter D.
Yeah, I would, my bias would be towards shorter policies and less policy. So I really think it's worth striking. If it's not, we're not doing it anyway, if it's not feasible.
And then-
No problem.
and the next time the policy shop or whatever says we need to relook at this, that might be back in there. We can think about it.
And if we do adopt this policy, I would ask the administration to look at making sure that we are enforcing the 20-minute lunch. And, you know, that's our policy.
Portion.
Yeah, I think
That's
that
the
becomes
recommendation.
tricky because it's, middle school, they're doing things during lunch. It gets very.
Doing things during lunch is still having the opportunity
They do
to
have the
want to.
I know, yeah.
Right.
But
From-
look at I mean, I just feel like we shouldn't dig too deep because then we'll start. But I is posting venues on the district website.
I just was saying that, I was wondering if you do you want to kick this back,
It must make it longer, but.
kick it back to committee and just cut out all the food references, or are they required by council?
Right.
This is what council recommended.
I think the thought was, I know that the BAC is going to look at this very issue, so that if the issue of a food program. So I think correct me if I'm wrong, we talked about it, having to go back into a policy, if it was decided that we'd ever have a lunch program, it would be important to have that as part of policy. I think we had that discussion.
Yeah.
And because I know that was something that the board was looking at, we wouldn't want to, and that complies with regulation, and the food service policy, so I believe we left it in there, just in the event that the district does decide to move forward with that, so that we have a policy that we don't have to go scramble and get a policy that is aligned to run a food service program. That's my recollection.
That's right, and we are required to revisit this policy.
Do we have any other questions or thoughts on this policy that we wanted to discuss? So it's a very long policy, I've forgotten how long this one is. I know in the past, we have talked about recess, making sure that it happens for kids, never taken away as punishment, is very a big priority for, it has been in the past for boards, and continues to remain so.
I mean, I can speak to that. Our practice is we don't take away as practice. We don't hand out lunch detentions. It's not what we do. As you said, Sarah, sometimes in middle school, kids want to see their teachers. There's always an opportunity for them. We use a lot of restorative practices. And our teachers know and have been really good at not, using loss of recess as a punitive for not handing in your homework. That we don't do.
Any other questions or thoughts before we move to adopt? So we can move to adopt, do I need to say as amended? Okay. Great. So we're going to approve policy 5661 as amended with the striking that language. Any comment? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions. All right, thank you, policy committee. Moving on to the consent agenda. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Preschool District, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, does hereby approve the items of the personnel consent agenda as presented. May I have a motion, please?
Second.
Yeah. Jen, did you want to welcome some of these wonderful community members onto the BAC?
Sorry, can I ask a question about the mentor?
Yeah, absolutely.
I know what the word mentor means, but I'm asking that question. What is this person you call?
So part of the teacher's contract is new teachers get a mentor. So it's one of our tenured senior teachers who wants to mentor this person, they'll just let them know from simple things like how to fill out an absence form to what to expect during parent-teacher conference, and someone for them to go to so that they can start to understand the community, understand their students, ask questions about, Krista is a seasoned educator. However, I don't care how long you've been doing this work, every time you come into a new district, there's things you need to learn culturally, procedurally, and that's what mentors do. And our teachers do a wonderful job at onboarding new staff members and welcoming them into the Dust family.
Great question.
So thanks to fellow board members for recruiting individuals. We have Mr. and Mrs. Sherwin joining us on the Budget Advisory Committee. We have one of them as a member and one of them as an alternate because they can't both come to the meetings at the same time due to childcare issues. So we have one alternate, and we now have 2 community members, and hopefully we will have our first meeting shortly. We have a third person, or fourth person who's potentially interested, who we've been playing email tag over the holidays. But I will be working in the next week to get a date on the calendar for the first meeting. And we're excited to start figuring out what questions we want to have answered, and then kind of divide and conquer and do some research and come back and then be able to report back.
Thank you so much. Those numbers, all right. If there's any questions, I'm gonna go ahead and move to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions. Thank you. Moving on to new business, be it resolved, Board of Education of the Garrison Union Preschool District, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, hereby approves the new business items as presented. May I have a motion, please?
Second.
Thank you.
Do you mind if I mention, I just have to thank GSAC, the Garrison Education Foundation, and our teachers for submitting some wonderful grants. GSAC has funded over $29,000 of really fantastic education grants. We couldn't do it without GSAC's support, the support of the community, and our teachers who take the time and effort and energy to bring new and exciting and bring back some ideas that have been really effective. So I want to take an opportunity to really thank on behalf of the students and the families and the teachers of Garrison, their generosity and creating a grant process that really brings incredible activities and events for students. So thank you so much to GSAC.
Any other questions or comments on the new business as presented? We'll go ahead and move to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions. Thank you. That brings me on to the last public comment of the evening. I'm not going to reread my paragraph, but the microphone remains open. I'm going to go ahead and close the second public comment of the evening and move on to board member comment and other discussion. Jocelyn, you're right.
No.
Oh, Eric?
No, just a quick thanks to the teachers union for bringing up the lively discussion tonight. It's necessary, and I'm glad we're moving forward in a positive discussion. So thanks to the teachers.
Thank you. Jennifer?
So I'd like to echo Eric's thank you to the teachers union. I think it's important that they realize that we're here to support them as well as the students, and I really appreciate you bringing that idea forward. And I also was really excited to see a buddy bench on the list of things that is coming from GSAC. So it's going to, so thank you to GSAC for funding everything, but also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Peter?
Yeah, I also want to thank the teachers union. I think it's a really important discussion. I really do hope we get the whole community to feel good about whatever outcome we have with this really important discussion. I think it's not just a logistical thing, it's also a cultural thing. And I think we need to really think about that and be mindful of what Garrison's culture is inside the school and outside the school, and how those two things can be in sync. So it's a great discussion to have, I think.
Yes. Okay. Okay, I have no further comment this evening. That brings us to enter into executive session.
Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby enters into executive session for the purpose of reviewing probationary instructional staff, discussing the mid-year evaluation of the superintendent, discussing matters leading to the appointment, employment, or promotion of a particular employee, and discussing pending or current litigation. We're in for a fun night, guys. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
I need a motion.
Oh, sorry, I need motions.
Motion.
I just assumed you were on the side. All in favor, please say aye. Nays, abstentions. We will adjourn with any further action being taken. Please log out on your computers. Thank you so much.
So it's hot chocolate, huh? Sometimes it's.
Yeah, I believe it is. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Do you know what temperature?
All right, thank you, Joey.
That's why Shane and I are